But without further ado, I will kind of move on to the main part of the evening and let our panellists introduce ourselves and get stuck into the topic of customer centricity. Dan.
Thanks so much, Ellie. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Dream Factory, one of my favorite venues for sure. So what I do is I'm an investor at 1818 Venture Capital. It's a Guernsey-based firm. But that doesn't mean I don't live in London. I do live in London. I'm the London office. And basically what we do is we focus on UK-based software companies. We like companies with a social purpose. We like underrepresented founders. And that's something we really hold to high regard. We do co-invest and we don't tend to lead, but feel free to come and talk to me if you're a software-based business. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Ben Musgrave. I'm head of product at Hinterview. We are a video platform for recruitment agents. So we help them embrace video and try and move beyond the CV and emails, etc. And I've been there about a year and a half, but the company's 6 or 7 years old, and we have done our Series A. So that's the stage that we're at.
Hello everyone, so I'm Anna. I'm the founder of Moona. Moona is a women's health company that's all about empowering women in labour through kind of education, pain relief, and a communication tool that links you at home with your midwife. We're still in the very early stages, so I founded the company about a year ago, and I come from a product design background, and that's how I kind of started it. And we're in the stage of kind of raising investment for our product development to try and actually get us to market. So yeah.
Hi everyone, I'm Natasha. I've never been here, but I'm absolutely obsessed with the venue. I founded a company called Surfboard. We provide forecasting and scheduling software for customer support teams. So we'll integrate into Zendesk, Intercom, Twilio, Salesforce, etc. to predict the number of phones, emails, chats, etc. A team will guide and then make sure they always have enough people scheduled so that you as a consumer aren't left waiting on the phone or waiting for an email to come back to you. Before Surfboard, I was chief of staff at Bulb, the energy company, which is where I came across the problem and a company that really valued itself on customer centricity. Yeah, that's me.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. My name is Will. I'm the product manager at a company called Inrange Golf. It's great to be here. It's great to sit in this lovely seat. I feel like I've done something right. And what's Inrange Golf? If nobody's been to Greenwich Peninsula driving range, you would know what it is. But we track golf balls on driving ranges. We measure those shots and we send them directly to the player, either using their phone or a touchscreen in their bay to show them that shot in real time, get all their stats, how fast they hit their shot, how high, etc. So it provides a great practice experience for the serious golfer looking to improve. And then we've also built an entertainment product for social groups and large groups as well to go to the range and have a great time, jumping on the bandwagon of competitive socializing, which I'm going to talk about today. Thanks.
Fab. Thank you so much. And I hope what really comes to life is that we've got a panel of really different industries, different stages of growth, and so some really interesting insights to come. So I guess kind of starting off with the topic of customer centricity, really broad question, kind of what does customer centricity mean to you and how have you incorporated it into your early stage growth? And Natasha, I'm going to come to you first.
Yeah, so customer centricity, I think at the heart of it is just putting your customers first. Unfortunately, I went for quite a cop-out answer, defining centricity and not defining customer. But in terms of what Surfboard does, we exist entirely to make brands customer-centric. And so whether you're a retail brand and you're about to embark on Black Friday, people are going to order a lot of stuff, they're going to spend a lot of money, their deliveries might be late, they might want refunds, they might have questions on the product or the catalog of services, and it's on you to make sure you get back to them as quickly as possible. And so Surfboard ultimately solves that. I guess rewinding a little bit to my experience at Bulb. At Bulb, it was a renewable energy company. Obviously, people were very stressed about their bills, regardless of the time of year, and especially more so now. And so despite being a company of, I think, 1,200 people, 800 of those were in the customer service team. And where it really tried to differentiate itself as a company was in customer centricity. every single customer service agent was trained on all topics, that you as a customer weren't getting routed from person to person. We tried to make sure that you could self-serve as much as possible. We didn't really use outsourcing agencies because we wanted everyone to be speaking to a bulb employee. I'm not saying that's like, you know, the example of how every company should do it, but I think it's reflective of customer centricity and mapping that end-to-end customer journey to do what's really best for the customer and enable growth through that customer centricity.
I guess to jump in here maybe, so from a Hinterview point of view, we were, I guess what maybe made it easier as a startup was the two founders ran their own recruitment agency and wanted this tool to differentiate, to provide a better service to their customers, and they couldn't find one out there, so that's how it was started. So it was great because they were their first customers, so it was pretty easy to understand what their customer wanted. They could then sell to a network of friends and understand from their friends who were also recruitment agents, what do they need, what do they want, what do they think. I guess the downside of that as you start to grow is you assume that every customer is exactly like you and I know best, so I'll just build what I need and everyone else will enjoy this as well. And as you start to grow, you have to make sure that you are still getting out there and speaking to your customers about what do they really want, to prospects maybe that haven't been buying, why haven't they been buying, what's been missing. So it's just trying to keep that feedback all the way through. And from my day-to-day, I sit in a desk with the sales team on one side of me, with the customer success team behind me, with our support guy now actually reports to me, and every support query passes through a Slack channel that I'm in that sometimes is great and sometimes is not so great. But I see all of that keeps it in me of like, what are people asking for, what are people using, what are people wanting?
No, so I was going to say, at Moona, we've kind of built our product with our customers and right from the beginning. And I think the topic area, like we're in, obviously women in labour, the women's safety is the most important thing. And I think whatever stakeholder we're talking to, we always need to keep that in mind when we're designing. And I think the insights that we got, because obviously every single person's labour experience is completely different, we would have never got those insights unless we worked with the customers directly. So we found that 1 in 3 women get sent home early from the hospital because they've come in before they're ready. And the earlier you arrive into hospital, the higher your chance of medical intervention. And then we found actually the midwives are saying this too. And it kept coming up again and again and again. And kind of every interview we had, every question, like we found that there was a massive gap in that stage when women are at home. And actually it's so important to us that we want them to be part of the journey, building the product. And we invest a lot of our time just kind of in conversation just to see what kind of more insights can come out of that.
Fascinating, thank you. And Anna, I suppose sticking with you, you're right at the beginning of your journey at the moment. How are you thinking you might begin to build kind of customer metrics into sort of your strategy from now onwards?
Yeah, so I think our customer metrics aren't about profit or loss because obviously we're not in the market, but that doesn't mean that we don't have metrics that we can still measure. So for us, it might be important, like how many interviews have we carried out? Are we actually getting insights and how many are we getting? Are we getting real life testimonies from people that we can then use within our marketing? We can use them on our social media. We can use them to kind of prove our business to people. And we don't use those metrics over a long period of time. I might set myself, say, 3 months and say, I want to get 6 midwives on my advisory board. I'm going to set myself 3 months, and then when I get that, I can almost tick it off. Because I think when you first start out as well, especially if you're on your own, you've got a very small team, you can't measure everything. So almost stick with one thing and kind of do it properly. Like say, I'm going to put all my effort into this one, and then it's not finished, like it's not ticking it off, but you can choose specific customers to focus on at set periods of time. And over time, that will then build your whole network, because it's almost, once you've got one customer, it leads to your next, and to the next, and to the next, and it's kind of an ongoing cycle. So yeah.
And Dan, I'm intrigued from a kind of VC perspective. What are you looking for from startups and founders when they're coming to you in terms of their awareness of metrics and their customer and how they might be tracking that moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. It's quite tricky when you're early stage like we are. So sometimes the companies don't even have revenue. Usually they do, but sometimes they don't. And we're also sector agnostic, which makes it doubly difficult because healthcare companies are going to look at certain metrics that fintech companies might not look at, that insurtech companies might not look at. And basically, we will take that into consideration when analyzing each startup. So especially during the due diligence process, we will break it down by sector, and we'll see what kind of metrics they're tracking. Consistency in the metrics is important. So a lot of companies have been turned down because of inconsistencies in their financials or in their projections. And that's just us, by the way. I mean, some investors probably don't do due diligence properly, and they're not the best, but it's very important to have second opinions on those kinds of things, because once you're not taking it seriously, you're going to be rejected by investors, which I think is quite unfortunate for some startup founders.
And I'm kind of one of the things that we've kind of picked up on when we've been doing the process over the last 6 months of building this program has been perhaps the tension that you have between product strategy and customer strategy, and you could find yourself in a position where kind of you're really focusing on kind of tech provision and kind of building your tech out, but actually kind of you then forget perhaps what your customer is looking for and after, and you then kind of get to a point where those two have become a little bit divorced. Ben, is that something that you've kind of come across with Hinterview at all? You can say no.
Yeah, we definitely have this, right? And there's a you know, trying not to become a feature factory of just building the next widget, the next widget, the next widget, that honestly this is going to, you know, save the world, Rodney kind of thing, you know, with everyone will come flocking to us and no one will ever leave us if we just build this one thing. So, but really looking at things in the round of, you know, I guess back to those customer metrics of what are your churn metrics is a pretty easy one to understand, but why are they leaving is much harder, and can you find a leading indicator that's predicting when they're going to leave to say, well, actually, how healthy are our customers and how much are they using our products and which bits of our product are they using, which can then inform your looking ahead of what do we need to do, A, because we need to be profitable or become profitable in the near future, and how do you make sure that, you know, profit and, I mean, we could be short-term profitable if we just got rid of all of our customer success team, but we wouldn't be long-term profitable, because actually one of the things that we've staked our company on and how we sell it is we have excellent customer support, and we have a really high-touch process there, and it's not just kind of fire and forget, great, you bought it, now let's move on, but you bought it, we've got training programs built out, we customize them to every customer depending on their exact needs, we work really closely with them. I get on a lot of calls that may just be like, sometimes it's with prospects even of what's coming up, because I want the reassurance it's going in the right direction for us. So yeah, it's really easy to go in an opposite direction, and you do just have to keep thinking about what's long-term correct, and normally the two align in the long term, because what's good for your customer should mean they stay with you, and you're worth more to them, so you can charge them more, and therefore it helps you turn a profit. And, yeah.
I think maybe I can provide an insight on what we've experienced at Inrange with lots of different customers around the world wanting different things. If people have been to Greenwich, you'd understand that it's very much an entertainment-focused venue, with a big push on food and drinks and people having a great social time. But that's very different to the needs of a customer who's trying to drive a high-premium golf club in Florida, attracting high sort of value customers, users to that venue. So one of the jobs for me is building a product that is going to meet the needs of all those different customers. And we've had some real sort of challenges navigating customers that want to use the traditional driving range business model of selling bucket of balls and moving them to a time-based system. Not all of them have wanted to get there, and it's kind of slowed down our product development growth because for that customer, they're a little bit nervous about transitioning to the way that we want to push the product. But what we've tried to do is build our product in a modular way so that that customer can still dynamically change our product so that they can have the best experience that they want to deliver for their range and run their business how they want to. That's kind of some of the steps that we put into putting our customers first.
Yeah, and Natasha, any thoughts from you? Kind of, obviously, you are a tech business.
I think the crux of it is you need to really well define your ideal customer profile, because at the start you're going to have a variety or like a motley crew of customers that range in size, in needs, in industry, and then you learn from the ones that have the most common patterns where it suits the product that you want to be building, and it also frankly suits the economic model where the economics of how much it costs to acquire the customer, how much revenue you get from the customer makes sense, and that's what enables you to really prioritize building the right things for the right type of customer. So, you know, when we started Surfboard 3 years ago, one reason a lot of teams wanted to work with us was because of our speed of iteration, how quickly we ship features, and then suddenly they get quite hooked on inputting into your roadmap, and they have this expectation Surfboard's going to deliver what we build. And then we've evolved our ideal customer profile to be larger organizations, and so a lot of the smaller ones are still like, hey, like a year ago you were building everything I wanted, why aren't you doing that today? And so that can sometimes become a tricky conversation, but I think the more disciplined you are in making sure you're very clear on that ideal customer profile, the easier it is to prioritize and make sure your product strategy aligns with what your customers want.
I think you had some bits around kind of, you know, some insights around the need for startups, obviously, to pivot around kind of customer and, you know, be prepared to be agile.
Yeah, absolutely. This is something that I've noticed changes from culture to culture. A lot of people underestimate the power of a globalized world and what that means for doing business. So in certain cultures, when you make a decision, people are more likely to stick to that decision than in others. So for example, in a US-based culture, people are much more likely to be able to pivot easily or to understand the concept of pivoting, whereas in others, people tend to make a decision collectively as a group and then try and make that decision work for everyone, whether or not it actually makes sense in the future. So having that ability and understanding of how to pivot can be super essential, especially when you have new technologies like Gen AI and things that are disrupting the market. You need to be able to adopt those technologies when appropriate. So yeah, I think maybe surrounding yourself with people from different backgrounds can also help to adapt and to keep yourself faster on your feet.
And I guess kind of you're saying that us Brits like to stick by our guns and prove, you know, that's our kind of backbone. But I think perhaps one of the things that we've picked up on is that startups are perhaps a little bit nervous about the impact that would then have on sort of saying back to an investor, well, that didn't work, so we're going to shift slightly. Should people be concerned about that, or is there a way of kind of navigating that and pivoting whilst keeping your investors or, you know, other people happy?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't really referring to British people, actually, because I would say British people are more in the middle. I wouldn't say they're super against pivoting. There are some cultures where people are against pivoting. British people tend to be a little bit less likely to pivot than Americans. That's just something people have done studies on. Sorry, can you just tell me the last part of what you said?
So should startups be wary of how to approach the pivot with investors, or embrace that and sort of say, you know, it wasn't working and therefore we're going to do X, Y, and Z instead? How should they kind of navigate that?
Yeah, I think it depends on who your investors are, right? So if your investors are German, they might not like pivoting as much. No offense, it's not a bad thing. It's just how certain cultures tend to view things. And normally when German companies make a decision, they like to stick to those decisions. Whereas in an American company, they might try and, you know, they're happy to make a decision and change it the next day. So if your investors are from a certain background, it's good to build the relationship and to understand one another. Personally, we don't mind pivoting. If you have a good reason, we tend to build strong relationships with our portfolio companies. So as a result, we're kind of following their journey and we understand why they might need to pivot. But I think if you have a good reason and you can explain why you're pivoting, that shouldn't be a big issue for your investors. At the end of the day, when you get invested into, your investor should be backing you as a founder. And if that's not the kind of investor you have, you probably want to find different investors.
Good hint. Thank you.
Can I, sorry.
Yeah, sure.
I was just going to add one more thing to that. I think sometimes also it's not a waste of time. Like, say you did want to pivot, that time that you spent on that, you will have still learned kind of valuable insights from. So obviously we've only been running for a year, and actually 3 months out of that year, we spent looking into automatic contraction monitoring. And we were so set on it, and that was actually something driven by investors that said tech, like do as much as you can, get as much data as possible. But after talking to the midwives, honestly, there was not a single one of them that agreed with that decision. They all said no, like that is not safe enough. The women won't be able to move around. You won't have that freedom to kind of, like there's a lot you can get from freedom of movement. And they were like, it's not safe. And especially as you're just starting out, they said just keep it so as human-centered as possible. And even though we spent all that time doing that, we got rid of that. And we said, you know what, that for us right now, that's not going to work. But throughout those 3 months, we'd actually kind of built those strong relationships with those midwives. And they almost respected us more because they could see that we actually took their opinion. We showed them what the product was before. We went back to them and we showed them what we changed. We didn't just do it amongst ourselves and think, yep, that was great, we've taken their opinion, now we're done. They take a lot of value in then seeing that development and saying, okay, they're actually willing to listen to us. And then the customers knew, okay, then we're going to give back to them and what they're doing. So yeah, I thought it was actually useful.
Lovely example, thank you. And I suppose one of the things that we've talked about as well is kind of how you might need to pivot. One of the things that might drive that is sort of emerging trends within the kind of socio-economic and potentially even political kind of climate. Will, have you seen, you kind of mentioned earlier around kind of developing a new product off the back of that. Can you share a bit about it?
Yeah, of course. So one of the interesting things that we've noticed in our industry is this idea of competitive socializing. I don't know if any of you have been to Bounce or Flight Club or Putt Shack or Electric Shuffle or anything like these. They're all popping up everywhere. And we've really jumped on that as well because one of the biggest, most high-value groups for us to attract is a large corporate group, perhaps all of us after this, to go to one of our venues and have an experience together. Now, typically a driving range has been somewhere where either an individual goes on their own or perhaps a small group go into a bay together, whereas we've built a product now off the back of this trend called Inrange Plus Teams that allows you to bring up to 40 bays all together on the same driving range playing against each other at the same time with a live leaderboard between everyone on an individual status but also on a team status so that everybody can feel included at the level that they're at. So that's been really exciting for us. There's a little bit else that's emerging is other sports want to get involved as well. It's not just golf that has decided that this driving range venue is the place to be. So I can't say too much about what they're going to be, but Inrange is exploring some opportunities to maybe not be Inrange golf forever. So that's quite exciting for us too.
There you go. You heard it here first. Natasha?
Yeah, I mean, for us, the biggest thing was the pandemic and the migration from fully on-site work to remote or hybrid work. What that meant was two things, is that, before you were running a support team or, a company and you could see everybody behind you, you could have really easy conversations, you could have impromptu meetings. And with the move towards more remote work or hybrid work, systems have just had to adapt. And so where we definitely position ourselves is making sure that's as seamless as possible and trying as much as possible to, to use the word Anna used earlier, humanize the experience, despite the fact that team cohesion can be a lot harder to build. The other thing as a result of the pandemic and remote work is you just have teams that are a lot more geographically distributed. So that cultural point that was brought up before is something that needs to be accounted for, and thinking about how technology and software specifically becomes responsible for managing a team and the role it plays in being sensitive to those geographic or cultural differences and nuances.
Anna?
So I think for me it's a big thing about within midwifery, understand reading the news and really know what's going on, because there's a lot of fear mongering going on right now. There is a lot of problems in maternity units. It's all kind of linked to the government, and everything is very, very closely connected. And we found actually that now through social media, because women just have kind of an abundance of information, they are coming to midwives and saying, I want this. And the midwives are saying, but that's not the safest. And they're saying, but I don't care. Like, it's all about what people read, and it's actually, you can't say no to that, because the women's choice is the most important thing, and they need to feel like they're in control of the situation, and you just have to adapt to that. So from talking to midwives, there is a huge rise in inductions, and since COVID, a huge rise in outpatient inductions. So an outpatient induction is where a woman is given a tablet, and this basically induces their contractions to make them start. They're then sent home for 24 hours on their own, and they have to manage that without anything given to them from the NHS. But this isn't something that the NHS is built to actually support with, because it's a much more recent thing through COVID that people are now on that time on their own. So we've kind of built that into how we're developing our product to make sure we are supporting for those kind of changes in how midwifery care is working.
I think for Hinterview, the two big trends that are affecting us, or that we're interested in, are firstly just the economy. You know, we sell to recruitment agents. They're really the bellwether of the economy. So last year was boom time for them. They couldn't remember ever having time so good. They were rushed off their feet, which wasn't actually necessarily the best for us, because if they're already, you know, raking in more money than they've ever raked in before, they kind of think, why would I change? And there's a cost, the opportunity cost of changing, that no, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. Then they had the complete flip to the opposite now of, you know, the economy kind of crashed and no one's hiring, therefore they don't have any jobs. So do they have any spare money? So for us, that means two things: of adapting our product, and what does it mean for our roadmap to suit, you know, a year ago what we were doing versus now what we're doing, and discussing, well, how much is it the product that needs to change, and how much is it how we sell and how we train our customers on how they can use it, because it is a broad product that is actually pretty flexible. So that's been really interesting for us, and it definitely hasn't ended. We're still, you know, having a lot of discussions around the best way of doing that. The second thing that you've touched on earlier is generative AI and what that means. And we have customers asking us for AI all the time, often just saying, can I have some AI, please? Everyone's doing it. Which, well, no, as of today, I think it is from OpenAI again. That's a really interesting one, because we're by no means anti-AI. We are anti putting it in for the sake of putting it in, even though actually, again, if you look at it from the other side of things, we think that some investors might encourage investors if we could tick the AI box, but what is the right use case? And we're using video for recruitment, which is about personalizing that recruitment. Instead of just my CV being sent across, when they just look at me on paper, actually they can see a video of me at the same time to really understand me. And so how are we going to use AI, and especially generative AI? Does it actually devalue that, because it no longer, do I lose faith that really is the person, and how can we deal with that? So we're looking at it from both sides of what is is there a use case to incorporate it, and how do we almost defend against it, say, well, actually it's about the person, and the person is the most important in the hiring process, so we need to not lose that.
And Dan, anything from your perspective in the sort of trends world?
Well, I've seen some startups getting very creative in terms of understanding their customer profile. So I've seen companies throwing raves. I've seen companies incentivizing their consumers or their clients to complete surveys by giving away T-shirts and doing various things to just get that additional data. And I think by doing something like that, you can kind of surpass everyone else, because you're able to just gather so much more information, and that just puts you miles ahead. So yeah, just being creative and obviously using AI to do the right things. I think he was right that people are just putting AI in there for no reason sometimes. And that's something we definitely keep an eye on. So, yeah, that's about it.
I think the thing that really springs to mind hearing all of your perspectives is just how quickly your customer can change and the mindset that they're approaching things. And sort of when we're talking about customer centricity, and one of the modules in our program that we do is all around customer journey management, and customer journeys aren't something that you just create and then pop in a drawer and hope that they then last the test of time. These should be like living, breathing documents, because actually what your customer wants at any given point of the year is likely to change, and then year to year it then kind of it changes and things, and and this is where we do begin to see that real tension between kind of product and customer come to life. If you're not then them two being two different things isn't a bad thing, but if you don't know that they're two different things, that is when it becomes a bad thing. So really interesting. The last kind of question I'd be intrigued about is kind of, classic kind of, if you could go back in time, a little bit of benefit of hindsight and all that. Kind of how would you have perhaps incorporated your customer into your journey? And, perhaps, Will, we could come to you first.
Cool. So maybe one of the things that we've been able to do a lot more as we've grown into a much bigger business with a lot more users that are using our product is building what's called kind of automatic feedback loops of people going through cycles of using our product and us putting out surveys to them, sampling data sets, getting that sort of constant feedback coming in and shared amongst our whole team, so people can always see what people are saying and when they're saying it. And that's something that we've really pushed over the sort of the last 3 to 6 months. I'd say one of the things we could have done a lot earlier on is get some of those feedback loops going from day one, talking to customers, getting some processes in place that mean that we're getting as much feedback as possible. That's probably one of the biggest things we could have done differently.
Natasha?
Yeah, for us it's similar, a little bit contrarian, but at the beginning we were very reliant on user research and concept testing. And so we were perfectionists in that we would try to speak to as many potential users as possible. We'd get some designs spun up, we'd then concept test them, we would do all that before committing to building. We viewed that as the ultimate de-risker, but in hindsight and with, I guess, like 3 years of data now, I would say it just adds more risk. You don't de-risk a product until it's seen the light of day, and you validate exactly how people use it and how much they're willing to pay for it. So now we've reduced our shipping cycles by 2/3. We don't do as much research. We back ourselves around conviction. We get the product spun up in the most MVP version possible, and then we give it to the sales team to start selling, and that's what validates, A, will people use it, and B, will people pay for it, which is really hard to do when you're just reliant on research. And if anyone hasn't read the MUM test, I highly recommend you read it.
Anna, I know that kind of this may be kind of, what are you kind of thinking about at the beginning of your stage of how you might incorporate the customer into this beyond what you've talked about so far?
Well, I actually think it's quite useful for people to understand how you should reach your customer in the first place. Because I think we talk like, oh yeah, I had this conversation with this customer and then I did this research. But actually, sometimes there's a huge gap between you and your customer when you first start out. And I think I would just say that from the beginning, you shouldn't be afraid of almost going to events where maybe it's not your subject matter. Like, I go to midwifery conferences that midwives have to go to train, but they have absolutely no problem with you attending. But there is that kind of fear level because it's not your expertise. And I think I would say from the beginning, I wish that I almost had a bit more confidence at the beginning to sometimes chase people up, that people you're talking to, this isn't on the front of their minds. Like, they're very busy people. They often work sometimes, so my customers, they all work shift work. These midwives are tackling 100 different things. As long as you know your subject, you've prepared before you talk to them, there is nothing wrong with reaching out to them more than once to try and actually get them involved. And then once you've got them, great. But it's actually spending a lot of time and knowing that it might be hard to reach your customers and not letting that put you off at the beginning.
Well, it's great to hear what you just said, Natasha, because the next product retrospective we have is on actually how we can do this, because we sometimes work and we basically build as we learn. It tends to be on the smaller bits that we do, and my designers and engineers work very well together, and that's great to see. But that creates inefficiency. And the other way of doing that is lengthy research, lengthy design, then it goes to engineering, validating at each step of the way with customers. That still always results in some rework at the engineering level and some rework again when you get to beta testing and actually starting to put it out there. So our very next retrospective is on what's the optimal way of doing that. There's possibly somewhere between it. And I think, the customer is not always right is also what I would always say. And I think you often need to be really strict on differentiating between customer wants and customer needs. What a customer wants is not necessarily what they need. And what customers often do when we're speaking to them is they're solutionizing. And actually, we really want to understand the problem of what are you trying to achieve here. And we will decide what is the best way of solving that from our point of view. And the most frustrating customer interviews I have is when a customer will, despite my best efforts, which suggests I need to do more work on how I customer interview and research, is they will only give me solutions. If you could do it like that product over there, I'd love it. But then this bit I want like that product over there, and this bit I want like that product over there. That's my perfect product. And one of our things that we sometimes push back to our customers is, you have bought a product off us. You haven't brought a service. So this is not an infinitely adaptable thing. If you chose this as the right product, that almost by necessity means you now have to adapt to the product that you have bought. So I think that's always helpful to keep that in mind as well. That are you selling a product or are you selling a service? So.
And Dan, just to round off, sort of what's your perspective and sort of anything you would have done differently in the past around customer centricity?
Yeah, definitely. In a past life, I was in a US-based health tech startup. So we built an app that lets you track and monitor your COVID status and COVID vaccinations and things like that. So I would look at this in two ways. Number one, product, and number two, vision. So in terms of the product, we started the company and we spent so much money on expensive tech, which we may or may not have needed. Maybe we should have done what Natasha just talked about, which is build the most MVP version possible, try and make sure you get sales, and then you can start implementing some of the more expensive technology. Number two, in terms of vision, we did successfully exit, which was nice, but I think it could have been a much bigger exit if we weren't so focused on this idea of like COVID-19. It was quite difficult at the time in hindsight, but we had the technology to expand way beyond that. We had the technology to allow you to put yellow fever vaccinations on your phone and like travel to West Africa or like other exotic places where you need a yellow fever card. That was kind of a vision that we talked about, but because our team was so headstrong about the COVID-19, we couldn't really see beyond that. And as a result, I think, and I'm pretty confident that our exit was smaller than it could have been. So yeah, product and vision.
Thank you. Some amazing insights, and I hope you've kind of taken away a couple of nuggets from the panelists. Thank you so much for your time this evening. It has been really interesting. Thank you. And I think from, again, reflecting on the work that we've been doing, the complexity of who is your customer. You have numerous different customers as well, not just perhaps your end user, and how do you plot them out and how do you ensure that you're kind of adapting your startup to be incorporating all of those, and the balance between sort of risk and development and things as well is something really interesting. So thank you very much for your time and for you listening so intently. I wonder if there are any questions from the audience?
Thanks, guys. That was really insightful. I think possibly from my perspective, this is one of the most undertaught, spoken kind of topics in startup world. I don't know whether, Dan, you can back me up here, but the number of kind of founders that you come across, to probably some of the points that Natasha's making, where, it's the classic Henry Ford quote, isn't it? It's if I'd asked my customers what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. So I guess question to the panelists and stuff is, to what degree and to what level do you think that it would be helpful for startup businesses to take and adopt this view of customer centricity at an earlier point in their journey? And realistically, how pragmatic is that?
I can go first. I think customer centricity is imperative from day zero or day one, but the form of customer centricity sometimes gets misunderstood. So when I say that in Surfboard's first year and a half, our view of customer centricity was excessive research, excessive conversations, excessive concept testing, yes, you would say we were customer-centric, but we were also very inefficient and probably made quite expensive mistakes, and the cost of build was really high, or opportunity cost was really high. I would say today we're just as customer-centric, probably even more, but I think that the arrogance or the hubris is probably less, because we'll make an assumption, we won't test it as much, but we will leave it to the customer to validate with their usage, their behavior, their words, of course, and their wallet, whether that decision was the right one. So I think customer centricity and the level of that hasn't changed. It's just how we convey it.
I would say that one of the companies we've come across recently that's doing a great job that we are likely to invest in have done an extremely incredible job of understanding their target demographic. So by hiring people from those groups that they're targeting, and just from being from that background, answering all the tough questions, we can see that they really understand their target market. They can answer all the tough questions, and they have the experience in the space, which makes it a very, very interesting proposition. So, yeah, I think customer centricity is essential, but again, you shouldn't overcomplicate it with too much research. I mean, you should, but balancing game of a startup founder. But yeah, try things out, MVPs, get your product out there and start making sales and see if it works. That's the most important.
Yeah, I kind of love and I hate that Henry Ford quote, right? Because
Same.
I think I guess it's
Classic
maybe it's
default.
back to what I was earlier saying on it's wants versus needs, and there's our sales guys actually talk an awful lot about the 5 whys. It's only on the 5th why that you really understand the need that underpins it. So I think, yeah, it's by being incredibly customer centric that to get beyond the want and all the way down to the need is actually what helps you build a great product. So it's by really focusing on that and not just being surface level. Oh, I went and asked them what they wanted, and they spouted off all these different solutions and features they'd like, but actually to really have an in-depth conversation and get all the way down to that 5th why and to really understand what is the need there.
I recently found out that the Twitch CEO, he had to make a decision whether to focus on the viewers or the content creators for the streaming platform. And I was surprised to find that he had focused on the content creators like really early on. And our platform, we do the same in terms of we work with content creators for delivering English education to English learners, but we always thought about focusing on the learner in terms of our product until recently. And I was wondering, in your journey to finding out your ideal customer that you want to focus on, how did you make that decision?
When I started Surfboard, we started working with 8 design partner customers, and all of them represented relatively different industries, relatively different ways of working, different team structures. Some worked with outsourcing agencies, some were all in-house, some were e-commerce and direct-to-consumer. One was like a car leasing company. And it was through those behaviors of who needs our product the most, and I think really asking a 5 whys is critical of, it's not just the persona that you're selling to, but what does your CEO care about, what does your CFO care about, what are the metrics? I mean, every salesperson has a different methodology, whether it's MedPick or whatever else, really getting into the psyche of the customer, and then identifying where it scales the best. And so we found, some industries just didn't scale for us because there wasn't enough of a need or a pull. And the customers that had just started working with us were the ones that worked with us because they were nice. They weren't actually the type that we could create a repeatable go-to-market or sales motion for. So I think number 1 is identifying market need, Number two is making sure that you can develop a process around that market need to then, aim to saturate that market and then grow beyond that. And then I think number three is that you don't have to do everything at once. So you want to be combining that market need with the lowest hanging fruit for you to build the right product for them. I think if we had said we're going to build a product for companies like Vodafone, for example, from day one, we'd be building for 5 years. Vodafone would be probably like messing us around. Nothing on Vodafone, I've never actually spoken to them. But they'd be messing us around for, their procurement process and whatever, and we would be getting nowhere. But I think in figuring out who can we sell to the easiest that needs our product, that enabled us to land and expand into different industries.
Cool. Well, maybe I can touch on what we focus on at Inrange in terms of who we focus on the most. Our product, and as it grows, is very much a network. And we're trying to identify who's going to be the most influential in that network. So perhaps for you, it was the content creators that are most likely to have the biggest impact and energy bringing that to your product. We've really tried and identify who are going to be the most influential people for us to grow our product and our brand. And some of those are more important customers to us than others based on that fact. So we don't go after everybody anymore. We really try and focus on the people who are going to be the influencers. And for customers, that's us being big ranges in new territories in the world. So we've recently taken over a big site in Indianapolis that was actually using an existing competitor of ours. That's become a great influencer for us, for lots of venues to go to that venue. And just capturing that one range has been much better for us than capturing sort of 20, even so in the UK if they were smaller. And then on players' side, even though they might not use the product as much, if we can get coaches and the most kind of influential people in golf on board with our product and talking about it, then that's going to help build up our reputation as a brand and our credibility when people are looking to choose us as a product.
I think it's actually really interesting because I'm kind of at that stage right now where we are trying to decide, and you just can't let it stop you, because I think sometimes you can go round and round and round and think, actually, but all three of these products would be great, and sometimes there might not be a right answer, but you just have to jump for one and go for it. And then you have to be realistic and think, actually, which is the most simple? Can we get to market? Can we get our name out there? For example, obviously, we would love to have this for every birth. We would love it for low risk, high risk, everyone, but it's not realistic to start with the high risk births. And you can also think about it that you can grow within the market. So if we start at low risk births, but we're gathering information as we're going, our product is almost always evolving and building once we're there. And then I think also from the business perspective, we would love from like a social value point to make our product accessible for everyone, to solve kind of the inequalities within healthcare, kind of women that maybe English isn't their first language, and that is a huge problem. But even if we obviously want to get there in the future, but that's not the right place to start now. We need to think about financially, how can we get enough money to start building the product, and then with our aim, like our end goal, that we are still reaching for those customers, like you almost haven't neglected them, just build it into your strategy for the future.
Cool, thank you very much. So the final thing that we were, did you have a, no? Oh, George, yeah. Just shout.
So this panel is focused on customer-centricity, and an important part of that is cultivating a loyal customer base. So it'd be great to know if you have found a single great method of building customer loyalty.
I can start. I think this relates to the previous question. You might be selling to someone specific, and this is a little bit different for B2B versus B2C or D2C businesses, but given we're a B2B business, you're selling to someone specific, there's a buyer, but you can't ignore the rest of the users. And so one example that I saw firsthand in a previous job was, Slack charges a certain amount per user, and the CEO came in and was like, we already pay for Google Workspace, why aren't we using Google Hangouts, the chat function, and everybody in the company just revolted and was like, we are not getting off Slack, whatever you pay for it, keep paying for it, we're leaving the company if you switch off Slack. And that, for me, planted the seed that I want Surfboard to be for customer service agents what Slack was to every employee at that company. Because if the buyer suddenly says a year later, oh, we're switching from Surfboard to something else, I want every customer service agent to revolt. And I think that's what really buys loyalty, when you're not just building for the economic buyer, you're building for the entire cohort of users so that they can influence the economic buyer as well.
That's a really interesting point, right? Because what the buyer wants is not necessarily what the user wants. And again, we have this discussion a lot that you know, our economic buyer tends to be a kind of late 40s, something like in their 50s, relatively senior in a recruitment company. The users will be 20-somethings, and 20-somethings nowadays are used to having video everywhere and to videoing themselves everywhere and photographing themselves everywhere, and they're comfortable with that, and the 50-year-old is not, probably. And so we often struggle to sell because the 50-year-old doesn't necessarily understand the power this can have and how natural it will come to people. And then when you get it in there and the users start using it, then that's when you see that traction. So really it's that same thing, and we struggle to get in the door, and then it hopefully gets embraced there. And again, it just comes back to understanding, it's understanding those different personas, what you have to build to be able to tick the boxes of those decision makers and those seniors, while also making sure that you have a delightful product that people want to use.
I think maybe from our business, I'm sure lots of you have read Nereal's book of the hooked model, but we talk about that a lot at Inrange, understanding what sort of triggers we can put in, how we can get our customers and our users to take an action that we can then reward. And rewards form a big part of us engaging people and incentivizing them to come back to the range, and also to extend our contracts as well when they're looking at renewal. That's the step that can help create an investment, and then we build out this cycle of trigger action, reward and investment. It's a really good book if you're looking at kind of understanding how to gain loyalty.